I can sit here today and tell you, based upon every brief that was filed and based upon every Supreme Court decision, that I should have never been in jail, and that every court avoided their responsibility and did not follow the law.
A pretty bold statement, but Dr. Richard I. Fine will back it up with alarming and irrefutable proof of the corruption in our California state justice system, coming up next on Full Disclosure.
Relentless, probing, fearless. This is Emmy Award-winning Full Disclosure with Leslie Dutton, bringing you the truth by revealing the news behind the news.
Hello, I'm Leslie Dutton. Today on Full Disclosure, we're bringing you the news behind the news in this part 2 of our home interview with Dr. Richard I. Fine. We ask him to explain how he first discovered the corruption that he's been fighting for the past decade. He said it started with an insidious and barely discernible resistance to his litigation efforts.
The resistance began in 1999, and it began and I can literally pinpoint it. The first resistance that I didn't recognize began in 1998 after I won the case with respect to stopping the $100 million going from the MTA into the county and the county being able to borrow $150 million from the MTA. And I lost it in the Court of Appeal because an LA Superior Court judge was on the Court of Appeal. But at that point, I figured, okay, I just lost a case. So it didn't strike me as anything. Then the next case was in the fall of 1999, was a case of the district attorney withholding $14 million of child support money. Now, usually it's the fathers, or nowadays it's also the mothers if they're earning more money, pay into the child support fund. The district attorney takes that money and then distributes it. He has to distribute it within 6 months. The district attorney was holding that money up to 2 years. We proved that, and the district attorney's person got on the stand and said that they admitted to doing it, and then the judge dismissed the case.
The judge dismissed the case even though the county admitted its wrongdoing. Something fishy going on here?
This is when I began to find out what was happening, because then I found out that the judges were getting paid money by the county. When I raised that, this case was called Silva versus Garcetti. When I raised that in the appellate court brief, the appellate court said to me, well, you're raising this too late. You should have raised it in the trial court. And I responded, I saying, they kept it a secret. It was concealed. Nobody knew about it. There's no way we could do it. They said, tough luck. I then found out that one of the appellate court justices, Justice Doy Todd, had been a former Superior Court judge, and she had received that money, and she didn't disclose it. So now I began to see the light.
Dr. Fine was in the middle of a class action case, the DeFlores case, which settled for $7.86 million. Under the final judgment, his law firm was supposed to receive approximately $2 million. For some reason, there was resistance from the court, preventing the payment of the judgment.
The man who was in the case, a man called Commissioner Mitchell, Bruce E. Mitchell, who was actually in the case only for pretrial things, stayed on the case even though he wasn't supposed to. And he went in on a whole campaign to remove me from the case and doing all these other things. And then he ended up stopping the payments, stopping the classes in a number of other cases that I was involved in.
And so Commissioner Bruce E. Mitchell began working to financially ruin Dr. Fine.
He had two positions. He was a commissioner, but he was sitting as what we called a judge pro tem, or a temporary judge, in the class action department for pretrial things, and also in the eminent domain department. Now, the eminent domain department is that department in the Superior Court that handles all the cases when you're coming in to take public land or private land for public purposes. And Mitchell was getting this particular money. And so what they did is they started in a campaign to try and economically kill me. And they literally went in through all these cases. They literally went in and froze out all my income from 1996 all the way through that time period, through the 1999 time period. that amounted, as far as gross fees were concerned, it amounted somewhere around $6 to $7 million.
Dr. Fine squared off with Commissioner Mitchell, who retaliated with the full might of the court.
I tried to disqualify him for not being the correct judge in the case and not following the rules, the local rules and everything else. He then ended up holding me in contempt for disqualifying him. And he did that without my being present. That was on September 24th, 2001. That went into the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals upheld that contempt, and I was supposed to go to jail for 5 days. I went into the California Supreme Court, who once again denied, refused to hear the case. I went into the U.S. District Court it was in June, and in August 12th, the U.S. 2002 we're now up to, the U.S. District Court came out with the order staying at the execution of sentence and ordering, what we called an order to show cause as to why they should not immediately issue a writ of habeas corpus.
Having been rebuked by the U.S. District Court, Commissioner Bruce Mitchell voided and annulled his contempt order, but never left the DeFlores case. According to Dr. Fine, Mitchell was milking it for all he could get from the massive settlement.
Ultimately ended up illegally taking $2 million out of the DeFlores class settlement fund to benefit himself and other judges.
As a result, Dr. Fine refocused his sights and filed suit against the judges.
Lacaos versus Lewin, which was against the judges for taking the money from the county, claiming that the money violated Article 6, Section 19 of the California Constitution. They dismissed that case, saying that that because there had been an order with respect to the attorney's fees and that order was final, I couldn't bring the case. Now that dismissal was wrong because since there was a fraud on the court, underneath it, the case could be brought.
Undaunted and not knowing what he was facing, he turned up the heat on the judges.
And I amended it and I filed the Silva versus the County of Los Angeles case, in which I named Judge Chalfant, who was the judge in the Silva versus Garcetti case with respect to the money going to the mothers and children. I named Doy Todd as an appellate court judge who was getting money and not disclosing it, and her two other associate justices on the appellate court, Boren and Knott, for not disclosing that they knew that she was breaking the law and didn't disclose it, which is also a violation of the Code of Judicial Ethics. And I named Mitchell as a commissioner who was sitting as a temporary judge who was getting the money. And this became a defendant's class action case where these were a defendant's class action. Each of these people were the subclasses, and the purpose of the case was to stop these payments based upon the fact that the payments violated Article 6, Section 19 of the California Constitution.
The defensive reaction of the court started to give Dr. Fine a hint of the size of the mountain that he was trying to move.
The district court then dismissed this case, this second Silva case, claiming that Silva didn't have standing, what we called constitutional standing, to bring it in the district court, even though Silva had a case going in the Superior Court to get an overpayment of money that he had made. So that shows you how the corruption was now beginning to go not only at the Superior Court level, but it was already into the U.S. District Court level.
We're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll show you how Dr. Fine legally cornered the judges, proving their corruption, and then we'll show you the extreme and frightening measures the judges took in retaliation to defend their illegal payments. We'll be right back.